Welcome back to r/Landlords from Hell, where we read stories about the worst landlords imaginable, and maybe after hearing these stories you feel a little better about your own landlord. If you are new to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our awesome community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled "Bad Landlord Scams His Tenants, Goes to Jail." Many years ago, when I worked for a rent-to-own company in a small town, there was a little apartment complex which we made frequent deliveries to and just as frequently had to repo from. It had been a motel when it was built, and the owner turned it into apartments by just making doorways in the walls between rooms, putting a kitchen and living room in one and a bedroom in the other. The place was very run down and apparently pretty inexpensive, and based on a few things customers said, it seemed that the majority of the tenants moved in there for short times. I figured it was because they were waiting for prefab houses to be financed and delivered, since the vast majority of housing in that town was mobile homes. Turns out I was wrong, but more on that later. Between deliveries and pickups, we were visiting this place multiple times per month, but the landlord would not let us park the truck in the parking lot to do it. It was a motel parking lot, so there was way more space than the tenants needed and plenty of room for our truck. But the minute we pulled into the lot, the landlord would come running out of the office and yell at us to get the truck off his property. We were still allowed to deliver and such, we just had to carry the couches and old-style rear projection big screen TVs across the gravel lot from a truck parked on the street. It was more than a little annoying. Then the day came that I was visiting some customers, a young couple, to have them sign an extension because they couldn't make their payment, and I saw an eviction notice on their door. I knocked, they answered, and then they, too, saw the notice. They explained that they needed the extension because they were behind on rent, but the eviction was unexpected because they were only 2 days late. The notice gave them 1 week to move out. They signed the extension and I left. A little suspicious because that did not seem right to me. A few days later, I got a call from the couple saying they needed to return the stuff they had rented because they were being evicted and had to move to a motel. I told them to wait there, I would be over in an hour. My wife had worked in the rental office of our previous apartment complex, so I knew some tenant laws. When I had checked after getting the extension signed, I found that evictions couldn't be served with only a week notice. They had to give 30 days for the tenants to pay or move out. If they moved out, the landlord could take any unpaid rent out of their security deposit. This was a small town with lots of mobile homes, so I am guessing the law was to prevent people being evicted from rented land on which they had a mobile home they owned, but it applied to apartments too. Normally I would have considered this none of my business, but everyone in our store hated that landlord and wanted to get back at him. So I printed out the applicable rental law pages from the town's website and drove over to the apartment complex. There I knocked on the door of every one of our customers living there, which was about half of the 20 or so apartments, and gave them a copy of the law. While doing this, I learned that the landlord had been evicting people like that for being even a day late and then keeping their deposits, citing the very law I was giving to my customers, just not the part about 30 days leeway. He charged rent in advance, you paid for the next month at the end of each month, so people were losing their deposits over being 1 day late. On top of that, the landlord would not accept late payments even if they were before his scheduled eviction time, because he made more money by evicting people and moving someone new in, since he kept all their deposits. I told the couple that had started all this that if I were them, I would not move out and I would contact a lawyer or at least the city housing department and file a complaint. They were worried because the landlord had said he would have the sheriff's department evict them if they didn't move out in time. There were no local police, it's a small town, but I said that even if the landlord called them, I doubt they would actually evict them if they cited the law. That was about all I could do, and I hoped it would be enough. And it was. The couple came in a few weeks later to pay for their rental furniture and to thank me for all my help, telling me the landlord had just been arrested. They had filed a complaint, and when the landlord called the sheriff to evict them, it had kicked off an investigation. I never learned what exactly the charges were or what happened to the landlord, but the complex ended up under new ownership and the new manager had no problem with us parking on their property for deliveries. Also, the number of our repos and deliveries there suddenly dropped because people were no longer being evicted constantly. Between that experience and other stories I have read online, I never cease to be baffled and annoyed that people don't know their rights as tenants. Check your laws, don't take a landlord's word for anything, and stand up for yourself. And guys, if you ever had any run-ins with awful landlords, I would really appreciate if you could either share your story in the comments or even better on r/ripe stories on Reddit, which is our own subreddit, and if your story is interesting, there's a good chance that I might read it in a video. And while you're at it, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support the channel even further. Thank you so much in advance. And the next one is titled "Bully Landlord Gets It in the End." My first husband was not a very nice man. For 6 years I was belittled and basically a baby factory for him. He was a fantastic father but a horrible husband. After he finally got his heirs, I was then treated even worse until I finally woke up and decided to leave him. This revenge story is not about him, I just had to set the scene. I moved out from the house taking just my clothes, the car, 4K value no more, and the computer. I had nothing, stayed at a girlfriend's place for a couple weeks before I was able to line up a crappy townhouse with roommates. I had no furniture and my bed was a cat pee smelling free couch I was able to score. I wound up having 3 to 4 jobs, with one of them being full-time, and once a week I would not even be able to sleep a night between jobs, meaning I have to stay up for almost 48 hours. Now, fast forward 1 year, my divorce was finalized and I had fulfilled my year's lease for the townhouse. By this time, from all my hard work, I had furnished the home, my bedroom and my kids' room when they would be with me for visitation. The scumbag landlord, we'll just call him SBL, was a nice-ish landlord during the time of my tenancy, and I was a good tenant, never being late with my rent. Although I had roommates, I was the sole name on the lease. SBL would show up often with some guys that he had to work on, something like plumbing tests or whatever excuse he could come up with, just so he could be all creepy and hang around trying to converse with me with mild sexual undertones that made me quite uneasy at times. Finally, the lease was fulfilled and I was now onto a month-to-month contract, to which at that time I was ready to move out of this crappy townhouse and found a great house in the mountains nearby, and I was simply thrilled now that I had gotten my feet on the ground and can afford a bit better than slum living. My lease stated that I had to give 1 month notice in order to move out. Unfortunately, I was able to get the house I was to move into for the next month, only 3 weeks away. I sent an email to SBL stating that I intend on moving out at the end of this month in 3 weeks and he can try to find another tenant, but I did state that if he did not find a tenant, I would still fulfill my legal obligation and pay next month's rent. Within 1 week, 2 weeks before I was to move out, he emailed back and stated that was very generous of my offer, but he was able to find a new tenant for the beginning of next month and I would be off the hook. He even tipped his hand by stating that he already collected a deposit from them. Now, something happened within a couple days after that, which was no fault of my own, nor my roommates. The townhouse came with its own appliances, fridge, oven, etc., including a clothes washer and dryer on the main level. My roommate had put a load of laundry in and went to the living room to have a nap. He awoke to find that the washer had malfunctioned with the sensory switch which never stopped the water-filled stage, and there was an inch of water in the kitchen and living room. He splashed through the water to turn off the washer and called me to come and help deal with this. I was just getting off of work and I whipped home to assess the damage. It was bad. There was standing water on top of the living room carpet and a good inch of water in the whole kitchen. I called SBL and told him the issue. By the time SBL showed up, I had already gotten most of the standing water out with the help of my roommate and friends that showed up with shop vacs. SBL did not seem too upset, which was surprising for me, and had an appliance repairman had come to look at the washer. The repairman even said, "Yep, here's the culprit," and showed the dial would stick on the fill stage and would not click over to the agitate stage. After replacing the dial and lubricating the whole deal, he left. The next week was chaos as I was busy trying to pack and SBL had insurance guys in assessing and workers taking out the carpet and cutting 2 feet worth of the lower drywall of the whole main level. The day of the move, though I was still supposed to be there for a couple more days, SBL had let himself in as movers were moving out my stuff with a camera, going around taking pictures of everything. I honestly thought that it was for his insurance claims. I actually felt bad for SBL, I'm too nice, and told him that I would not ask for any of my deposit back, and he responded in front of the loading crew and my roommate and said, "Thank you, that's very generous of you." We parted ways and I thought that was that. I was wrong. 2 weeks into my new home location did SBL show up on my doorstep with a summons to appear in arbitration because he was suing me. What? On what grounds? He stated it is all in this paperwork and handed me a manila envelope with 18 pages of everything he was charging me with. All including photos. Now I know why he was going around taking pictures, nickel and diming me on everything from a bent Venetian blind that was like that when I had moved in, and some scuffs on walls, etc. But then he also wanted me to pay his insurance deductible and that following month's rent. He claimed that the tenants that he had lined up backed out at the last minute, claiming that they didn't think the place wouldn't be ready in time with the new drywall and paint and so on, so he still wanted me to pay that month's rent. Really? Screw this. I knew I was more than generous of giving him my whole deposit and then for him to come back and sue me for thousands? He was not only claiming the damages caused by the flood, but improvements he needed to do that should never be or have been my responsibility in the first place. Even cracks in the living room wall that was from the building settling, how should I be responsible for that? Even new lighting, faucets, etc., all mainly on the accusation that I was negligent. I was not going to have that. I know it was a slummy townhouse complex and most of his tenants were on welfare and maybe he could got away doing this with others, but not me. No way. I had just gotten out of a marriage that made me feel insignificant and had horrible self-esteem, but now I had my dignity and felt strong for the first time in a long time. No way was I going to let any more BS happen to me without my doing something about it. I had 10 days before the date of my arbitration meeting. I immediately got to work, first getting a signed deposition from the very repairman that had showed that day, stating that the appliance was quite in need of maintenance work and the last time he had done any maintenance for him was almost 5 years before. From thoroughly reviewing my rental contract and local laws, SBL is obligated to have all appliances maintained/serviced every year. I had also talked to some of the other tenants and had heard that this was not the first time SBL had sued tenants after the fact. I hunted them down and got sworn statements from them also. Unfortunately for them, they didn't know what to do and mostly didn't show up at arbitration, hence SBL winning by default. No way I was not going to let him do this to me. I then drew up a rebuttal to each and every claim he had, including photos from the year plus that I had lived there, printed out all my email correspondence and even convinced my ex-roommate and one of the movers that heard my interaction with SBL about him, stating how generous it was of me letting him keep my whole deposit, which was a significant amount, to come. Day of arbitration, I dressed up in my power suit and with my ex-roommate and worker in tow showed up at the meeting. Now in Canada, arbitration is not held in a courtroom per se, but it's still held at the courthouse in a conference room with a judge. We had 1 hour with this judge. Since SBL was the plaintiff, he got to go first with his case. He spent over 40 minutes going over everything and I sat quietly until he finished. Once he finished, I then hauled out the rebuttal in multiple copies, handed to the judge, to SBL and anyone else that wished to have one, and I quickly went over each point. SBL was irate and interrupted almost every second sentence I spoke. I would pause the moment he would start talking and say sweetly, "I was quiet and polite during your time to present your case. I hope you grant me the same respect." SBL started to get red in the face, especially when I got to the deposition of the maintenance worker for the appliance. I included with that the Tenancy/Landlord Act sections pertaining to appliance maintenance and stated that this was the only record of maintenance that had occurred, and unless he can come up with more recent records from perhaps another company, it was over 5 years since anything had been looked at. With my defense, I had also then countered that I would like my deposit back and my day's pay from work since I had to take that day off to go to this meeting. The judge then made his statement, and I will always remember this for the rest of my life. He stated that first he was very impressed of my presentation and that I obviously have a good handle on things and can tell that my nature is of kindness and respect, especially with photos of how I had the townhouse furnished and clean and bright in whatever home I would live in. The bottom line, not only did I win my case, I wound up having SBL owing my over 80% of my deposit back, including interest. SBL's face was priceless. The judge then proceeded to tell SBL that they will be reviewing again all his previous filings, and if there was enough evidence of harassment, he would be reported to the Board of Landlords and Tenants. I don't really know if anything came out of that. Now, I walked away that day feeling on top of the world, completely justified, and he got a taste of his own medicine. But it did not stop there. Oh no, knowing that this guy has a history of suing tenants, I printed up my final results and the judge's signature and gave a copy to each and every tenant in that complex. I wanted to warn everyone of his practices and to keep notes, photos, etc. so that he couldn't do that to them. But I didn't stop there. He still now owed me money and I asked repeatedly for the payment. He never responded. He had until a certain day to pay me back my deposit, and on that day I had gone to his house. I looked up his residence under public records as he is a landlord and had to file under a certain address and knocked on the door. He didn't answer, though I knew he was home. I rang the bell a few more times and knocked loudly. He then turned his house alarm on, which at first startled me, but quickly turned to humor seeing how much of a coward this bully turned out to be. I then yelled out loud enough that I'm not going anywhere. He yelled out, "Get off my property or I will call the police." Okay, no problem. I got off the property but camped out on the front sidewalk. I had a fold-up chair, a cooler with water and sodas, a few sandwiches and all my paperwork with me. I was set to stay there forever. I then would tell anyone that would walk by. Already there were some people there from the house alarm fiasco about how I was a tenant and wrongfully sued me and that I have a claim against him and he now owes me money. I let anyone look at the paperwork just to back up my claim. The police did show up and they first went to talk to SBL and he was claiming that I was harassing him, slandering him and wouldn't leave his property. I was on public property, sidewalk, and it is not slander if it is true, of which I had all my court-signed paperwork to back me up. I wasn't disturbing the peace, I was simply and quietly seated outside his home and just talking to neighbors about his actions. He was out yelling that I need to leave and I quietly stated that I would be happy to leave once I am paid, that he was legally obligated to do by that date. I was not going to leave before I got money in my hand and I was more than willing to stay there and tell anyone that would listen to me why I was camped out. The police stated I was not doing anything wrong, that it is public property, I was not disturbing the peace, and it is not slander if it is true. Finally, after an hour of SBL yelling on his front lawn at the policeman, and at me of course, did his wife come out with money. She handed the money to the police, of which in turn handed the money to me and signed off documenting final payment was complete. I sweetly smiled, thanked the police deeply and went home. I have no idea whatever happened to SBL and if he is still pulling crap like this on others, but I hope that I helped put the fear of God in him, that he cannot just screw with people because eventually it will come and bite him in the butt. Sometimes the nice guys or girls finish last, but with patience they finish with a win. And indeed guys, sometimes that happens, and when it happens it is definitely very satisfying, like in this case. However, I think at least on my channel we have heard a lot of stories that don't end as positively as this one. But I mean, every now and then it is definitely good to have a feel-good story. And guys, unfortunately we have already reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and if you haven't already, please also go to patreon.com/ripeyoutube, where I upload exclusive Reddit videos starting at just $3 a month. This is a great way to support me in case you are interested, and the chance for me to become independent from YouTube revenue. Thank you so much for watching, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.